Hi, I'm Jae Gruenke, and I'm a renegade.
Renegade is what happens when two ordinary friends dare to practice the lost art of conversation to better understand what it means to be a runner, a human. Should we follow convention and play by the rules? Or would it be better to trust our guts? Each episode, you'll learn from the experts, the underdogs, the elites and non-elites, those doing big things, all in that curious quest of being just a little bit better tomorrow. In a world of runners, be a renegade. All right, friends, buckle up. We are sitting down with Jae Gruenke, the mind and soul behind The Balanced Runner. Jae's not your typical running coach. She's a former professional dancer and honestly, a bit of a movement whisperer. She's spent years decoding what makes running feel good, really good. And she's helped everyone from Olympians to a legion of everyday runners who just want to ditch the pain and find their stride. I'm talking about people who have been told their injuries are permanent, only to discover through Jae that there is another way. So what's the Balanced Runner? It's this beautiful thing Jae started back in 2003, a philosophy, a practice. It's about stripping away the noise and getting back to how we're meant to move, fluid-free, almost primal. It's less about forcing your body into some perfect running form and more about waking up your senses, rewiring your coordination, and just letting the magic happen. Over the last 2 decades, Jae's touched over 1 million runners through her online programs, her hands-on work, and her workshops. She's not just fixing shin splints or tweaking posture. She's handing people a whole new relationship with running. We're pumped to dig into Jae's story, unpack her approach, and understand what it means to run really well. And for our Renegade listeners, Jae has provided a discount code for 15% off either a video analysis with Jae or 15% off the Balanced Runner 6-week online camp or both. Use the code RENEGADE to save and to improve your running technique.
Hey now, what's new and exciting?
What's new and exciting? Well, we got our Paluva shoes. That's exciting. We got to thank Mark and the team over at Paluva.
My toes will never be the same.
So I brought your pair to work and I left them at your desk because I knew you were in your office. You were busy. And then an hour later, I see you walk out with your Lems. I'm like, Lems, get those Paluvas on.
Well, I went to work with my Lems on because I got to splay all day. And then now the Paluvas are going to have to make the rotation now. I do have to, I think, strengthen my toes a little bit more because you just need to steer them into the right channels, because I know once they're in there, I'm golden, but it's just getting them in there. So I don't know if you ever had that, that challenge initially when you've put on toe shoes.
Absolutely. My first experience wasn't with toe shoes. It was with the toe socks and the Injinji toe socks. And they took a couple minutes to put on. But then you learn, you got to learn the splay. Once you get that splay, then you wiggle those toes in the slots and
get them in there,
you're laughing.
Locked in. And I think that's it. Initially, in anticipation of the shoes coming, I ordered some Amazon special toe socks. There's a little bit of extra material at the tips of the toes there, so not perfect fitting. Yeah.
Got to get you Injinji. We'll get you some Injinjis. And if Injinji, if you're listening, hook us up with a discount code. You can be a sponsor of the podcast, potentially. Or just a friend of the podcast.
And what do you have today there, Todd? What's in your hand? You looked a little thirsty there.
Well, today, it's an Athletic Light. It's my favorite 25-calorie, 5 gram of carbs brew. It's non-alcoholic. I love it.
Well,
what do you got? What do you
the last several times I've been sporting the same athletic brew, the High Wave. Free Wave. I was going to try and make a highway to hell joke there, but nope, Free Wave. What can I do instead? Rocking in the Free Wave world. We have the Balanced Runner coming online with us today. And do you know what else is well balanced? The Free Wave. Some tasty notes
That's a good one.
of seawater. I'm just kidding. It's no seawater.
Seawater.
Just trying to think what's in a wave, you know.
Seawater.
Crustaceans.
Some Himalayan
No,
salt.
doesn't taste anything like crustaceans. It tastes quite
Well,
yummy. But
cheers, Mark. Cheers to Jae Gruenke, who's the Balance Runner creator, joining us on the podcast.
when you're having on Jae Gruenke and you're thirsty for a drinky, there's an athletic brew for you.
There you go.
It's a great pleasure to have you here. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Excited to talk with you guys.
Well, you know what's funny, Jay, is going back about 8 months. I was out running in front of my house and I saw Steve Stainer. And Steve is like, you got to have Jay on your podcast. So I'm like, well, first, she has to agree to come on the podcast. And so we were running. We did like a 10K together. And he has always been trying the barefoot style running. Great running form. And I could see that his running has transformed. And he was talking all about you during that run. And 8 months later, here you are on the podcast. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been great to watch him. I mean, I haven't had the view you have because I've just worked with him online and he's been a student in my camp. But he's been, very communicative and sending reports and updates. And so I have a sense of his evolution, and it always just makes me so happy to hear about runners doing well and feeling good.
So, Jay, I don't know if you have listened to our podcast or not, but just to kind of give you a little bit of a background. So my name is Mark. I guess I can still say I'm new to running because I'm kind of in and out lately. I've taken the winter off, but I'm getting back at it. And so I bring the perspective of the noob or the new to running individual. And I'm grateful to have somebody like Todd in my life to provide me with tidbits of information over time and from his running journey that he's had. And he's met a lot of amazing people over the years. And somehow we found our way onto this podcast here. And now we get to talk to wonderful people like yourself on running and how it can actually make us better people as well. So I would say for our listeners, who is Jay and why running?
I'm still trying to figure out who Jay is. It's an ongoing process,
constantly.
Right? My name is Jae Gruenke, and I am a Feldenkrais practitioner, even though I would be wiser not to lead with that.
And why is that?
Oh, because it just comes across as, a little bit woo-woo to some people. There's some misinformation about it online, although it was actually developed by a scientist, and there's a lot of good data on efficacy. So, but you don't necessarily see that first thing. But what that means is that I am interested in movement and the learning process. I'm trained in how to see how people are moving, see what the gap is between what they're actually doing and what it is they're trying to accomplish, figure out what it is that they don't know about themselves that is putting a monkey wrench in the works, and then create a learning process for them where they get to where they're doing what they think they're doing and they're able to fulfill their goals. And so and I decided to do that with runners after it helped me have the dance career that I wanted to have when I was a professional dancer. And that leads into your second question, which is why running, is because I had to run as part of a dance job and it felt just awful. And that really frustrated me because if I could dance, for heaven's sake, why couldn't I run? And that was a really interesting question to me, and my favorite kind of question. And like, what was the difference between me and people who seem to run well and enjoy it? And at the time I was training to become a Feldenkrais practitioner. So I was learning all of these tools, and I used my Feldenkrais training program as a laboratory to figure out for me, what was that gap between how I was running and how people who seem to love to run were running, and how could I learn to run like them? And once I did, then I decided that I preferred running to dancing and was ready to move on anyway. And I also realized that the things I figured out were things that most runners would never stumble across. Like the things that really made a difference to me, and I could see would really make a difference to other people who looked like they were struggling, were things that at that time, like 2001 or so, you could read every issue of Runner's World. You could go to Barnes and Noble. The internet was not much to offer at that time. But anyway, and not read about any of it, except occasionally some advice to the contrary. And so I thought, well, there is a real need for what I've figured out here. And that's what I wanted to do as a Feldenkrais practitioner. So I've been doing this work ever since.
That's great.
Now, we're not much of dancers at all, Jae. But I can tell you this, and I'm just going to put this out there for a second. I would assume that dancers have unbelievable rhythm control. They can feel the music, the rhythm. And translating that into running, there's a lot of similarities, correct? What would you say the biggest similarities that you discovered between running and dancing?
That is such an awesome question because no one has ever asked it that way. And foreground in my mind is the differences. Like there were dance specific things that I was doing that made it really difficult for me to run. And I had to learn how to, pare away the stuff that was specific to like a ballet based dance technique in order to get good at running. But coming into the question with like rhythm and coordination, was that the other word you said? Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, self-awareness. Right. Yeah. Well, those things are, rhythm is obviously fundamental to running. And most runners interact with that just as a question of cadence. And, and here's where I think runners already go wrong. And it's not that runners go wrong. It's like the advice goes wrong. It's like, there's a correct thing you should be shooting for. Right. And maybe that's 180 steps per minute or like whatever for cadence. But dance is not like that. You have to move in all kinds of different rhythms. And so your nervous system, you develop this huge repertoire of possible ways that you can move. And then you get very good at self-organizing, to choose the right option to fit the situation kind of just through feel without a lot of intellectual activity, right? But if you just train for one thing, then you're not very resilient. You're not very versatile. And like, okay, maybe you can execute exactly a perfect 180 steps per minute on the road, but what are you going to do on a rocky trail when your rhythm is constantly being broken by the terrain? How are you going to deal with that? So that's where, it's almost like that's where the self-awareness comes from. And this is kind of the heart of how I work with runners is, took me a while after I started working with runners to realize that most runners feel that they're not very self-aware and in fact are bad dancers.
Okay, so I'm not the only one.
And I think the potential is there. But the more you explore different types of movement, the more you discover yourself and, your range of options and how your body really works. And so, I think with cadence and with many other things, runners shouldn't always be shooting for the one perfect thing. And for the love of God, not just always running at the same speed on a treadmill listening to audiobooks.
Oh.
Because there's no challenge, there's nothing interesting in your movement there. And so you'll get one deep groove and it better be a good one. But it's bad for your body because you don't have the variations in loading, and it's bad for your nervous system because you don't have the stimulation to be aware and to learn. And so you miss a lot. So you can, like runners may be kind of stuck in a groove a lot. Runners may be not very self-aware, but there's nothing about running that means that you have to stay there. And even though you come to a point where your PRs are all behind you, unless you choose a new kind of challenge that you've never done before and you can set a new one. You never, ever come to a point where you have run out of things to learn and where you can't continue to improve your skill. And so it's the best goal.
Interesting. So do you have an ideal kind of client when you have an opportunity to work with so many different people? You've worked with everyone from Olympians to probably people like me who are brand new to running. But what is your ideal kind of client? I guess somebody who has an open mind, I guess, first of all, to be willing to change, right? They're coming to see you to begin with, right? So what else? Is there anything else within an individual that you've found, I feel that, this advice and they're willing to follow through with these recommendations? What has worked well for you in the past, I guess, with a certain kind of person?
I mean, bringing a sense of curiosity is really the key. And that's not specific to any level of runner, right? Well, there's more that can be said about that, but we'll leave it there for the moment. The second thing is having a desire to be able to, just loving running and wanting to be able to run for the rest of your life. And again, that could be any runner. You've kind of fallen in love with it. And you never want there to come a day, at least until very close to the end, where you can't do it. And then beyond that, I mean, I love working with beginners who have a mindset that I need to learn how to run. There's got to be, I'm new to this. I don't know how to do it. There's got to be something to learn, which was not always the default assumption about running, right? But I also love working with people who are, for whatever reason, and there are a lot of reasons, willing to step outside the box. Because everything I do is outside the box. And outside the box is where all the interesting stuff is. And I think where your opportunities for growth are. And I have found that some of the people who are willing to step outside of the box are actually the best of the best. So not even just world-class runners, but the top. Those are the people who are looking for whatever can take them the next step, whatever can, it's not even necessarily like a calculating kind of, where can I find an advantage that's legal? It's more like just, how can I keep developing myself and, finding more ways to fulfill my potential. And so that type of runner is very exciting, stimulating to work with. But, I love my beginners.
It's like finding, it's like finding those efficiencies, right? It's like, I'm still the same person, and I am, whether it's movement, whether it's like you're saying steps per minute or what have you, it's finding that way to evolve yourself. And then you're looking at the longevity of being a runner, right? Running for as long as possible, as long as you're able to, without injury, of course, right? So I think that's wonderful. That's great.
Yeah. Well, and you're looking for the ways to stop fighting yourself, because running is not gymnastics. It's not surfing. It's a fundamental human gait. Like, we didn't invent it. We evolved to do it. And so there's something profoundly human about it. And all the things that people do that make it hard for them to run or uncomfortable are just ways that they're getting in their own way. And so it's always about like peeling the onion, stripping back, like, how are you interfering with your movement in a way that you weren't even aware of? And you uncover so much when you do that. And you uncover this profound humanness, and you uncover yourself, and you uncover your relationship to the world that you are not just running through, but like, you can't make running in a vacuum. You have to have an environment you're interacting with. So it gets way deep, really. So there's more to love. Like, the more you dig, the more there is to love.
Hey, Renegades, we have something exciting to share with you today, and it's all about revolutionizing the way we think about footwear. Enter Peluva, a brand that's setting new standards in the world of shoes. What makes Peluva unique? It's their commitment to foot health, with a design that mimics the natural movement of your feet. We're talking about shoes that give your toes the freedom to move independently, enhancing your balance and strength with every step. Plus, they blend this with style. Check out Peluva if you're ready to walk, run, or just stand in a way that your body will thank you for. This isn't just a shoe, it's an upgrade to your daily life. Give your feet the comfort and style they deserve with Peluva. And as a special offer, you can use the code RUNEGADE for 15% off your order. That's RUNEGADE, and you'll get 15% off your order. Check them out at peluva.com. Your feet will thank you. You know, I want to go back to something that you said there. You said, stop fighting yourself. Runners, we're good at fighting ourselves. And you mentioned something, I thought about this. Is running something that instinctively, when we're born, we know what to do? Or do you actually need to train to run? Thoughts on that?
I have never seen a baby slide out of the womb and start running.
You're right. I haven't either.
I'm with you.
Yeah. A baby chick can come out of an egg and very quickly be getting around.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot more that's done by reflex in other animals that, we're born undercooked, right? We actually need an additional trimester out of the womb to kind of land here. And we're born not knowing much of anything, but wired to learn. And so a lot of fundamental things, that other animals are born already knowing how to do, we've got to learn, and running is certainly one of them, which is why it always seemed like a ridiculous argument to me that like you shouldn't try and learn better technique because everybody has a natural gait they're born with. It's like, no, actually nobody's born with any gait at all. Right. So yeah, we definitely learn it, and you can always learn it better.
Well, I'm with you on this because Mark and I will laugh about this, but probably like our running gait when we were learning to run a little bit when we were kids, we went to the store and we probably got our first Reebok pumps and we're pumping up these shoes and who knows what we were doing. But before that, when you're out running in the grass, you're enjoying it. And when you look at kids nowadays and they're out running in the grass, they run different than humans, but they run very similar to the runners that we see at the lead pack of the marathons and the big events. There's got to be something about that. Is like, from your perspective, what are the similarities between a child running unabated and the lead pack of the best? Yeah.
So, like a child who grows up reasonably physically active, which is not a given anymore, right? But yeah, such a child again is engaged in organic learning. They're just engaged in a process of feedback loops with their environment. I want to get over there. I want to catch that frisbee. I want to jump really high. I want to try and touch that butterfly. I want to, and then how can I do it? And then not consciously, but like, did that work or not? Or how can I kind of find it in myself to be able to do that? Feedback. And variety, ideally. And then the process of becoming an adult in our society is a process of that shutting down, right? The school, the desks, the bad shoes, now the devices, the long hours. I have an online client, a firefighter actually, in another country who was talking about his journey. He said, they don't tell you when you're a kid that you're going to have to fight for your health. But now that's true. I mean, I've got a 16-year-old son. I mean, I see it. So your brain is use it or lose it. You can't keep all these neurons that aren't doing anything. So if you don't keep using what you know about yourself and the environment through running, those connections in your brain get pruned away, and you get super good at using a mouse or whatever. And so then come out the other end of that, sometime in your 20s, you've got a bunch of movement habits that are a poor match for running. Sitting being the worst, but any movement habit associated with the device is going to be just terrible. And so then there's a lot of relearning that has to happen. And then on top of that, life isn't perfect, and we tend to get hurt, not just through running, but any number of ways. And we make protective compensation patterns around those injuries. And the brain, being conservative, tends to stick with the last thing that didn't get you killed. And so that's your compensation pattern. And people are rarely given a process to really relearn the way that they moved before they got hurt. And that's not exercises, that's not restoring strength or whatever. It's just like we have a map of our body in our brain. It's called the homunculus, or sensory motor map. We create it from birth, or maybe from before, because any map we were born with would be way out of date by adulthood, right? So it wouldn't be much point. So you create it the way every map is created, through exploration. And when there's a part of that map that you can't access, it sort of fades away. Again, these like connections in your brain get pruned away, and it's missing or it's wrong. And if you don't go through a process of exploration, and it has to be exploratory, to remap that area, then it's just missing or it's just wrong. And then you have the intention to run, and
could help you run your
Start
first
listening
half
to our own
marathon.
shows, and then but I can as I'm training, right?
Yes.
And take everything that Dr. Mark has given in terms of wisdom and advice, put that into action.
Just don't listen too closely because you'll start commenting too, like Tito.
And then I'll finally understand why the foot is so important.
It is. It's very important. You mentioned Explore. Our friend Alex Hutchinson's brand new book came out 2 days ago.
I saw the title and have not. Yeah, I'm so psyched about that. Yeah.
Well, I listened to him on the Rich Roll podcast, and he's going to come join us in a upcoming episode.
Awesome.
And he talks about how we are hardwired to explore. And he mentioned you talking about maps, and on the podcast, he was saying there was a story about the brains of London, England.
Oh, yeah, taxi drivers. Yeah, I know. I've heard about this.
You've heard about this. There is something that when you explore and learn and draw a map that you can visualize, that you experience yourself, that your prefrontal cortex or some part of the brain gets larger than people who don't explore. And maybe that there's an element to that. You know, you start off talking about maybe Mark and I, the guests that we've had on the podcast, all kind of mention this word, and we joke about it a little bit. About comes up every couple episodes, serendipity. So there is a serendipity in life where we might think it's very process oriented, that there's something to follow. You need to be like repeatable. But the best guests that we have come on who tell us, just like what you're saying, there's something else to it. There's an intangible, a spiritual element, some sort of other element that is undefined. Dr. Maffetone talked about, look at the lead pack of a marathon and tell me they're not musical. Remember, Mark, he was telling us this?
Oh, that's great.
And, you got Dr. Maffetone saying this, Jay, you're saying this, Dr. Lawrence Van Lingen saying this, Dr. Mark Cucuzella. All these folks are saying that there's something else that you can't really articulate, but there is, and we see it ourselves. Like from your perspective, what is the best or the optimal running form for a new runner and an experienced runner? Are they the same? Are they different? But what are the key elements from your side to keep that connection to this other thing that we can't define?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought it down to the concrete. I think that fundamentally, running form and like the characteristics that I've seen over more than 20 years of working with runners through an exploratory process so that they discover good running form in their own bodies, is that looks remarkably similar for every runner at every level. And I think it's an emergent property of the physical forces and the intention. It's an outcome, not an input, right? So the characteristics that I see just emerge are a forward trunk inclination. And I feel like in a way that's still controversial in a way. So forward lean from the ankles would be like the more common way of saying that, but because the legs are constantly moving, is it from the ankles? Hard to tell, but your trunk is going to be tilted forward. That doesn't answer all questions, but it's, that's the trunk piece. And that's somewhat speed dependent within distance runnings. Sprinting is another different thing, but the forward trunk inclination, and then really fundamental is the movement of the core. So I call it the core action as opposed to core stability. Of course, core stability wasn't originally meant to mean hold everything still, but it kind of sounds like that's what it means, and it's very often applied that way. But that is, we can't locomote like that, except for like two-footed hopping or like on a bike, because you're only on one foot at a time. So your weight has to go from foot to foot because the feet don't come to the midline. And even if they did, the hip joint doesn't come to the midline. So you don't have a vertical support there. And so there's a counter rotation. It's actually a spiraling action of pelvis versus thorax, your thoracic spine, your rib cage. and then an accompanying twist in your neck that allows you to keep your head forward or looking wherever you need it to look, even while your upper body is turning, right? So you've got a couple of twists going on. So that's critical. And that is a fundamental regulatory mechanism that tends to produce a forward lean, and it tends to make the legs work well. And so I always look there first. The foot strike can vary, but the leg should be supple upon landing. So you don't want a stiff rod sticking out in front of you, right? So the ankle should have some flexibility. The knee should be bent. We can talk about optimal, but we don't need to right now. We're just looking for general principles. Supple leg. The ankle is vertically aligned with the hip joint at mid stance. So mid stance is the point when you're completely done landing and you haven't started taking off yet. You're fully on your foot. And so you can see that like on video, like I'm always, when I do video analysis, I'm going frame forward, frame back. Can I pinpoint the moment when the head is at the lowest point, when the runner's body is most compressed? That's mid stance. And at that moment, regardless of terrain, regardless of slope, the hip joint and the ankle joint should be vertically aligned. That can be a little hard to feel, although it varies. I mean, Romanoff named his whole method. That's the pose in the pose technique, right? So like, I'm not the only person to think that this should be palpable. But anyway, so that needs to be vertically aligned. And when it is, then the relationship between your legs and the rest of your body through the whole gait cycle is good. Otherwise, that's where you get into knee problems, overusing your quads, not knowing how to use your glutes, hamstring issues, foot issues. If you don't have that alignment, all sorts of problems flow. So what have I said? Core action, forward lean, supple leg, mid-stance alignment, your arm swing. People are getting better about their arm swing. When I started doing this, everybody who even thought about anything about their form was pretty convinced that the arm should just swing front to back. And it's usually explained with the argument that when you're running, you're trying to just go forward. So any side-to-side movement is wasted movement, which like sounds good, but not very. Right? Because there's this thing about each leg is on its own side of the body. And so loading, the moment in your running gait, when you get that 2.7 or times your body weight, is in mid stance. So you're dealing with that load when you're on one leg. So you got all this asymmetrical force going up through your body. So things are not supposed to go side to side to deal with that and to align you. No, of course they are. And you've got this core action, this counter rotation of upper and lower body. And so your arms are going to ride that action. And that means that ideal, the knuckle comes to the midline. If you have a zipper down your front, like your knuckles should be coming right to that zipper each time. So people get worried about overcrossing, but overcrossing is not nearly as bad as doing something to keep your hands from coming to the midline. You know, it may be associated with a little most runners overcross a little on one side. It's usually associated with other asymmetries. And if they're not having any pain from that, it's like, we just don't worry about it. But trying to keep your arms going any kind of straight forward and back is not good. So I say, bring your hands to your heart. And what that means is that your elbows are going to stick out an amount that otherwise you'd have to bend your wrists. Right? No. So people try not to stick their elbows out. Your elbows are going to have to stick out. There's such a thing as too much. If you're sticking out too much, you've rounded your back. You know, the problem is elsewhere. Don't try and pull your elbows in. Again, way less bad. If you look at Evans Chebet, he tends to run. Is it Evans Chebet? I think it is. Oh, now I'm questioning that. There is an elite marathoner who really keeps his arms, you know, really in front of him with almost exactly a side-to-side movement. The elbows almost don't go back at all from some angles, it looks like. That is not nearly as bad a problem as, you know, runners who are trying too hard to have quote-unquote good form and they're pulling their elbows back to in and back, because that just shuts down the core action it interferes with your lean. It brings you upright. When you run, the two sides of your body always need to be doing opposite things. So anytime you do anything with both sides of your body at once, you're shutting down proper action. You can't then have this reciprocal relationship between your sides. So I'm almost there. There's one more, and it is leading with your face. So it's not as popular a running form cue as some others, but sometimes you'll read that you should not let your chin stick out, that you should bring it back. But that just makes, I was just working with a client today who had that habit. And so I gave him a lesson and it loosened up, but it was sort of, he wasn't really aware of having made the change. So I had him go back to like pulling his chin back and running and then letting it move forward. Almost like a racehorse leads with its head, right? That's a way better image than any sort of run tall kind of image. And the difference was just crazy. And he felt so stiff with his chin pulled back. It just turns your whole spine into a pole.
So you touched on something there that I would think I had the hardest time. I probably just missed it when I was reading and learning all about this stuff. But I kind of misinterpreted everything to be linear, one axis, like arms back. I totally forgot about the rotation. And once you discover the rotation and what it feels like, it can transform your running.
Oh yeah.
I probably got myself into trouble because I was moving like a train on a train track, just like one direction, do, and it didn't work. And I ran myself into a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
But I'm with you, that counter rotation. For me, when I first saw it, it was 2019, went down to Harper's Ferry, did a run camp with Dr. Mark. And we went running with him. And right away, you could see that he was doing something completely different than what I thought of from the runners that I ran with. And it was this counter rotation and leading from the face forward and whatnot. So anytime I think I get myself into trouble, I just go back to that moment in time. And I'm like, I'm running behind Dr. Mark. And
nice.
You can picture it. And I don't know, like maybe that's something too, Jay. Like runners, I would say, have a hard time kind of figure out their control of the body. We talked about that as they might not understand the like where their body is in space and time. And I don't know where I'm going with this question. It's probably a terrible question. Mark will tell me afterwards. But it's like, how do you get that connection? Like, how do you get that feeling that that you can find your rhythm? Does it come naturally from practicing those 6 steps? Or is there something? No?
Yeah. Like I said, those 6 things, they really emerge. Okay. My whole career has been this kind of dance between trying to get accurate information out there so people just stop teaching the wrong thing, because a lot of runners are getting hurt because they are diligently trying to do the wrong thing, like make the track with the arms chicka 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 in front to back, right? To really tighten the core so it doesn't move, to run tall. That's my least favorite running form cue because it's vague and wrong.
and then you start in your photos, your head starts going way up in the air. You're like, you're craning your neck. I got in that trouble too.
Just a bunch of bad photos, Todd? Is that what it was?
Yes, bad photos, you name it.
So I mean, that's where like my use of the Feldenkrais method comes in, is like I give these lessons which are exploratory in nature. You can feel kind of at sea, like, I don't really exactly know what I'm doing here. What does she really mean? Which is not because I haven't given clear instructions, generally speaking, because that's part of the training of a Feldenkrais practitioner, but because you've just never thought of doing a movement like that before. And it's hard to believe that's what's being suggested. And always with feedback loops. Does this or that make it easier? Can you reach farther in a particular direction by doing this or that with your head, by, say, letting your head tip back versus tucking your chin? Well, you have never, at some point in childhood or infancy, you did discover the answer to that question because you were reaching for something and you were trying to figure out how to get something that's just out of your reach, right? But it may be gone. at this point in your image of yourself. And so the lesson gives you an opportunity to compare those things side by side. Oh yeah, wow. If I let my head tip, if I don't insist that it is always right to keep my chin down, then my spine can like, wow. And that's really easy. And when you feel that something allows you to fulfill your aim, that is more comfortable and easier and more effective than the way you were doing it before, then you own it. And you'll employ it even when you're not thinking of it. And so like in my online course, I have these kind of standard sequence of lessons that catch what most runners are doing. However they come into the camp running could be wildly different, but set the stage for the kinds of explorations that tend to cause these 6 elements to emerge. Does that make sense? It's, it would be so nice if I could just say, all right, concentrate. If I could use short sentences and say, do this and then do that, and then you'll be running well. But instead, I have to use long sentences that sound kind of roundabout, because the real answer is you're going to have to discover your own body. And when you do, and when you put enough different options to the test, your running is going to get better as if by itself.
But you know runners, Jay. We just want to come to you and say, Jay, tell us exactly what we need to do, and we'll go practice nonstop for the next 3 weeks, doing exactly what you told me to do. Fix me.
Well, that's why. I mean, some people get frustrated about that, but most people do one lesson and are like, "Whoa, I don't know what happened, but that feels really good," and then they've bought in enough to give it more of a try. But mostly, people come to me after they've tried, like all the things that people told them how to do, and it didn't work, or it backfired horribly. Sometimes people come to me because they just have a feeling that something is off about that. It just doesn't seem right to this list of stuff you're supposed to do, So yeah, some people come because, that just doesn't seem, I don't know, it just doesn't sit right somehow. But mostly people come because they've given the other thing a try for many years, and they've finally hit a point where like it just can't solve their problems. And that's because your problems are mostly not, to some extent, they may be because you have a mistaken idea about how you're supposed to run, but mostly it's not your idea of running that's wrong. It's your idea of yourself. And so when you can improve your image of yourself, when you're working with a more accurate map, when you have explored the options and you can feel in a way that no one can argue you out of what works better for you in running, then you feel, then that works. I don't know. I forget the beginning of the sentence, so I can't finish it neatly. But Absolutely. You see where I've gone with that.
This must be challenging, though, to take all of this knowledge that you have and the need to almost, like, you probably just want to reach through the screen for anyone that you're coaching to try and correct how they're. So how have you found, like, over the years to, I imagine you're doing a lot of coaching online these days as well?
Yeah, I took my business all online in 2016, actually, because we were moving internationally every few years, it turned out, and I just had to take it online.
So technology helps in the sense where slow motion videos and whatnot, but how else has this been able to, are there a lot of difficulties, I guess is what I'm asking, with having solely a online coaching for running for the nature of what you're doing here? Because everyone is so different, and it's all the number of things that you just mentioned, and all these tweaks and slight tweaks and adjustment. And you said, you can't just use 1 or 2 words anymore. It's full descriptions is what they're doing, right? So how have you found that?
Yeah. So it is frankly quite hard to work online. But I've been doing it since 2016, and I've figured it out. And basically all the work I've done with elite athletes has been online. It definitely works. But before that, I had more than a decade of in-person practice, solely in person. And so that's the kind of foundation. And even then, well, okay, let me see. I still vastly prefer working in person. I moved to a new place. We always hope every move is the last one. And still hoping that. I'm in Salt Lake City now. And I'm just in the past like 8 months or so got an office and I'm starting to build up a local and in-person practice. Though mostly people are flying in to see me from other places. So we do like a chunk of work in person, and I hadn't been, like, I started to go in person when we landed in California right before COVID, but then of course that just went away immediately. So I hadn't really had an in-person practice since, 2015. And the joy of getting back to being in real time with people while they run, being able to touch them, to say, here, let's just move your elbow a little bit. Do you feel that? Okay, now try running that way. Like, it's so roundabout how we have to get there online, but we can do it so directly in person. So that said, my job is always to ask the question when I see a person run, what does this person know? Like, first, what's working? And then what's probably missing in their self-image? Like, what is the thing that they need to know about themselves that would make the difference and that would cause them to correct their own form, right? And then to give them a learning experience that does that. And so what I have done, Feldenkrais practitioners have been recording audio lessons since the 70s, probably, maybe even before, on cassette tapes, and that's like a spoken lesson is also how you would do like a group class. So this is a well-trodden path for giving Feldenkrais lessons. And so that's what I do online. So I see how a person's running. I figure out what they need. And then I have hundreds and hundreds of audio lessons that I've recorded specifically for runners, Feldenkrais lessons that relate specifically to running, because some of them don't. Some of them are good for other things, but they wouldn't help you run. And then I sit down, I figure out what they need, and then I pull from my library a stepping stone, and then the next stepping stone, and the next stepping stone. So it's every step is safe, every step is comfortable, and at the end, they've come to running in a really different way than they have imagined, because if it's not on your map, you can't even imagine it. You just can have a hope. So that's how I do it.
Well, I want to go back to something that you mentioned. You touched on most problems stem from improving one's image of themselves. Maybe we can unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
Do you mean that we have a bad image of ourselves when we're running, or the wrong image, or we're talking, I don't know, what are we doing to self-sabotage? Is that what you're maybe thinking about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's like there have been inaccuracies have crept into your map, stuff you never discovered about yourself, stuff that you had to change because, again, you had something else that you were doing more of that was it's not enough like running to be useful, like a ton of sitting, like we all do. Or, I mean, for triathletes, triathlon is really in the forefront of my head just because I was working with a triathlete this morning. And so maybe let me think of a good example for you. And yeah, I'll just go from my morning session because it's just so fresh in my mind. So triathlete he has really good ankle plantar flexion. So he can extend his feet. He can point his feet very well. He could sit on his heels in kneeling, and have the fronts of his ankles be on the floor. And I think that's probably more often the case for people who do a lot of swimming. So that's good. But he wasn't using it when he ran. It just, because of the way he was moving the rest of his body, he would just never get into a position where his toes were very bent, his heel was very high off the ground, where his toes were still on the ground, his ankles extended before toe off, right? He would keep his ankles pretty dorsiflexed. I still prefer the dancer terminology of just point and flex. It's so much simpler. But anyway, so why? And something about his image of himself in running made him feel like he had to really activate his back muscles a lot and kind of pull his head back So it's the same guy. I had to do this experiment that I was talking about. And when you do that, you've got a lot of weight going backwards when you come onto your forefoot, when you come towards toeing off. And so the toe off has to have, it gives you kind of a glider gait rather than a gazelle gait, right? Your heel can't come up very far and you need to just get that leg in front of you really fast. And when we did a lesson that helped him feel something which had not been in his mind before, it was really about somewhat the ability to extend his hips and how and why you might extend your hips more in running than in cycling, right? Like a lot more. I mean, obviously, if you didn't extend it more at all, you weren't running. But anyway, and that the back could be longer, and that actually works and feels better. It's somehow it's not how he came to running or how he's been running lately. And so I had to make it possible for him to feel those changes. Then the heels start coming up more.
Wow.
So
That's awesome. Well, it doesn't work for mine. That must be new.
Yes. You know, I do it again and I can never make it happen again. This is like, for people who are just listening, like fireworks just went off behind me on the screen, you know, one of those, like, it can't be Zoom. I thought I turned that stuff off on my computer, but it's clearly still happening.
We'll send people to the YouTube channel so they can see it at this point in time.
It was perfectly timed. That's right. So I don't know if that was a clear enough example.
It is.
Yeah. So it's not like there was no bony restriction or anything. There's no reason he couldn't extend his ankles, except that he didn't know how to run in a way that would extend his ankles. And then once he did, he did. Does that answer your question? Or
absolutely.
You know, yeah,
it does. It does make it clear to me, because like what you were saying there is we might be a result of running a certain way because of something that we're doing, knowing or unknowingly in our brain, but it's because of a multitude of factors. And to our earlier comments, runners aren't really good at 100% knowing, like what they're doing or how it should feel.
Well, you know, I feel I didn't fully. You asked how do you get to? You asked a question along the lines of how do you get to feel yourself better, and I'm now realizing I never fully answered that. But by engaging this exploratory process, you can go from like, I'm not really sure what my chest is, my sternum moving or not. Sternum, I can't really feel that I have a sternum. I don't know, my hips, my pelvis, is it move? I can't tell. I have no idea. You go from there to when you do enough movement exploration, again, you're making that map. The coming out the other side of that, like you have the map. Your sternum is just there. It's just there. You could sit still and feel that you have a sternum. You could turn it side to side and feel, oh, it's turning, you know, like it's no longer a mystery. So it's just, although it can feel frustrating at the beginning, the first few lessons where you're like, I don't know, you ask all these questions and I have no idea the answers. It's my job to ask questions I think you don't know the answer to, because it's by trying to tell that you discover. So it just gets better, and it is possible to be running. I have an ultra runner client who was like, he had a really good race that he had to DNF from previous year. And a couple things came up in the race, but he could feel why they came up and adjust his movement. So they just went away. And he said, that was before I would have had no idea what to do. Like my knee would have started hurting and I would have been stuck with a hurting knee. But now I can feel, oh, my knee's hurting because I stopped moving that shoulder. And so I can just I can feel how it is I'm holding that shoulder still. So then I can let go of that shoulder and then my knee stopped hurting. And he could do that in real time in a race. Like a runner can have this. And I want more runners to have it.
How? I would say that my running, I'm trying to be more in tune with the sights, the sounds, the smells, the feels, all that great stuff. And the more time I spend doing that, the more time you start to realize stuff that's going on in your body. I'm
Yeah,
catching
nice.
myself holding so much tension all the time. And maybe I was always holding this tension. I just never paid attention to it now. But I'll be at work and I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, like I've been clenched for 15, 20 minutes. And then I notice that in my running too. Like, I don't know. Does it come with time, Jay, that maybe the evolution curve is you notice it and then you can relax, but then it slowly subsides? Or are you always going to fight this for the rest of your life of becoming aware and getting better? From your perspective?
Well, you're never perfect. And nothing ever stays exactly the same unless you die, right? Because you're always living and interacting and adapting to everything that goes on in your life. But your average gets better and better and better. Your ability to even feel, like if you can't even feel that you're holding, you can't stop holding. You know, Moshe Feldenkrais, one of his famous quotes is, when you know what you're doing, you can do what you want. If you have no idea what you're doing, then anything you try and change is going to be like, who knows what's going to happen. So definitely, like already you're telling me that you can feel a lot more than you thought. And I think it's beautiful and not at all accidental that the more you tune into your environment around you, the more you feel yourself as well, because it's always a relationship. And that's really great. The thing about relaxation is we're not actually ever relaxed when we run. Like it's a fair amount of work running. Like you're not like, technically, if we look in an absolute sense, like we're completely relaxed is lying on the sofa. You're not ever going to be fully relaxed when you run. But the feeling of relaxation in running is the feeling of not having any excess tension and not interfering with the movement you're trying to do. And so what feels like tension, I mean, what is tension? Holding yourself that's creeping in is, well, you can feel it. Holding yourself, it is interfering. It's muscle effort interfering with what you're doing. We're cross purposes to your activity. And if Feldenkrais jargon, you're cross motivated at that moment. You're trying to do two different things at once, and only one of them is running. And so the question is not necessary. So trying to relax is only ever a partial solution, because you're not trying to, and people sometimes go wrong by trying to relax too much, like running with floppy hands. That makes running more work, not less.
You saw my video.
If you just like ran around like this, that would be more work, right? So what you were trying to do is differentiate between necessary activity and unnecessary cross-motivated activity, and get better at the necessary stuff and stop doing the other things. And so anytime a runner feels tension and tries to relax, it's always temporary. And the real question is, what is it you don't understand about the action that you're trying to do? And can you fill in that gap so that you just never activate muscles to hold to begin with when you run, right? Understanding better what you should be doing. That's a shorter way to say it. Instead of trying to relax, you just need to understand better what you should be doing, and you won't feel tension.
You got it.
I got a short sentence.
So Jay, I know our time is starting to draw to a close here, but I do have a couple quick questions, if you don't mind. With your coaching journey, what's the most exciting place that has taken you on this planet? Has it taken you very far? Have you traveled the world? What's your...
Oh, there was, once you work online,
things, right?
you don't necessarily travel. I was traveling for other reasons, for family reasons, trailing spouse. And so, I've been a lot of great places and seen a lot of great things, and everywhere we've lived, we've tried to travel from there as much as possible. So I feel really lucky that way, but that's not a result of my work.
Gotcha. Okay. And then my second question is, when you're not fixing people's stride, do you still make time to dance?
Oh, it's so funny. Well, my favorite core workout is Latin dance exercise, right? So I will do that and I enjoy it. And I goof around in movement. I'll improvise to music. Like my husband's a pianist, and when you live with a musician and they're practicing a pice of music, means they're playing it every day.
Talking about running every day.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it gets really, it's not like living with someone who's like performing all the time. And so I would often just like improvise in the background because I knew what was coming. So, like a goof around like that. It's fun. It's Salt Lake City. I've lived here before. I lived here from when I was 6 to when I was 9. And when I did, I took ballet classes here. It was the first dance classes I took. I took them with Ballet West, which is one of the really good regional ballet companies in the country. And so coming back kind of took me back to that. And I now have a season ticket to, watch them. I was a modern dancer ultimately, but it's given me like little yearnings to go back to ballet class. Just for the fun of it. It might kill me. But it's out there. But put that against the opportunity to get into the mountains for a great hike. I would take the hike every time.
Very nice. Awesome. Well, Jake, we've truly appreciated this time with you today, for us this evening. And we thank you for the knowledge you've shared. And I know as a newer runner, I have a lot of new tools in my tool belt that I can hopefully use. Todd was joking earlier about me potentially running my first 5K like race. Race. Yep.
Sorry, I don't mean to undermine you, Todd, but I think it's really okay. I mean, it's great to try a race, but you can be a runner without racing. I mean, for me, as a dancer, like I had to deliver. I had to deliver no matter how I felt, right? Like I had made a work commitment. I needed to, the performances were on particular dates. I needed to come through, even if I had to tape up my foot or, like whatever. So when I stopped dancing professionally and started running, I was like, I just want to go out and enjoy my run when I go, and I don't want to be on a training schedule, and I don't want to feel the pressure to race. And if I ever do want to do that, then I will. And although I have run a couple of races and I understand the pressure to perform because of dance, the desire to race to train and race actually hasn't hit yet. I mean, when my kid's out of the house and I have a little extra energy, possibly. So have the experience, but you also can really be a runner without racing. And a lot of my students are.
You're bang on. The main reason I want Mark to get through a race, because he spends his mornings running through a cemetery. I'm like, we got to get you on the cemetery, Mark. We got to get you onto
to a real crowd, right?
To a real crowd. No, I'm with you. You don't have to. Yeah, you're bang on. You don't have to run a race to be a runner. As long as you're enjoying, you're out in nature. There ain't better than you mentioned earlier. There's nothing better than a hike. There's nothing better than a trail run, which is just a fast hike. And I know Mark likes the aid station, so I'm trying to get him to an ultra one day because I know he just hang out at the aid station the entire time.
My cookies, so excellent.
So awesome. Jay, you have the Balanced Runner. Where can folks find out more about the Balanced Runner and yourself?
So you can find me at balancedrunner.com. That's the hub. And that's my blog, which goes back to 2014, I think. Been blogging a long time. And then you can find my services there. There's a link to the online camp, which is our main course. And then I have some other courses as well. My video analysis and online coaching. And info on finding me in Salt Lake City if you want to do that. I also have done a lot of YouTube videos, so on YouTube as the Balanced Runner, but do watch out. I'm not the only Balanced Runner on YouTube. There's also an Australian guy who uses the same business name, so, check the accent.
We're familiar with
And,
that for names.
Yeah, I heard about that story too. Yeah, man. And with YouTube, it's tough because they let two channels have the same name if you're naming the channel, whereas other social media don't. And I'm also on Instagram and gradually doing more of that. You know, when even my demographic is starting to depart from a social media platform is usually the point at which I start using it. So I'm just slowly coming up to speed on Instagram, but there's an increasing amount of content there. And again, make sure it's me and not the Australian guy.
Well, it's funny because we started the episode, Mark and I were just talking about the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. We joke because we got the 6 degrees of Dr. Mark Cucuzella.
Yes, I'm one of them.
Everything comes around Dr. Mark. He's going to come back on the podcast soon, but
Awesome.
I know you helped him with his Air Force training, correct?
Yeah,
what was that called?
It's called the 1-2-3 Run program. So the Air Force gave him the job of helping the new soldiers who were not able to make the running cutoff, helping them do that. And so he developed like just a really simple running form protocol, and he wanted them to lean forward, and they were finding it hard. And so that's actually how I met him. Was I wrote him and I said, well, you know, you could reach your face forward like you're going to give someone a kiss. You can even and he translated that to give Granny a kiss. And that's like number 3 in the 1-2-3 run protocol.
I've heard Dr. Mark talk about the lean forward and kiss your grandma. I've heard that. Jae, thanks for sending over all those photos, the links. We'll put that all in the show notes.
Saying to people where they could find me that they can also have a discount. But so with a RUNEGADE coupon code, 15% off video analysis or the camp or both.
Perfect. Well, Renegades will love that. And it's highly recommended. I've done, I would say, the video analysis with friends and whatnot when I was first getting into running. And then when I went to the run camp, and when you can run next to somebody who knows what they're looking for, they can keep you out of a lot of trouble. We really appreciate you being so fantastic, reaching out to us. You've been a great guest. This has been an amazing conversation. Folks are going to love this, Jae, because you got right into the nuts and bolts of it, those 6 things. Oh, people are going to love it. So we can't thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the chance to talk with you guys.
Thank you for listening to the RUNEGADE Podcast. And we'd love to hear from you. Send us a note. RUNEGADEpodcast@gmail.com. That's RUNEGADE podcast@gmail.com. And we'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. You can check out our YouTube channel, and you can follow us on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. And remember, in a world of runners, be a renegade.